Welcome back to Ty and that guy and some other guy.
Ty and some other guy.
We're bringing it down today to a lower energy level, but a higher intellectual level. We're going full NPR. Now that Wes isn't here, we can talk about, intellectual things, philosophical things, things that a working actor just wouldn't understand. So today, what we're going to talk about is fear. Specifically, fear in creative pursuits. So Wes and I were having a conversation recently that made me think of this. As an actor, and I would guess this is true of every actor, there are projects that you make because as an actor, you have so little control over what the final project looks like. You can read the script, you can negotiate with the filmmakers, and when you're on set, you have some ability to discuss the project with the director and the producers and the writers. But ultimately, you have no control over what gets filmed. You have no control over the cut of the movie, which is really where the movie is written, is in the cut.
It's huge.
So you can wind up where you have spent months of your life working on something that you are then embarrassed to have people see. And you and I are working on a project right now.
We are. Which
is unusual for writers in that we are doing the part of the project that is usually private. We're doing it in public. It would be sort of like, in the 90s, 80s, 90s, where there was still live studio audiences for sitcoms. The actors would go out and there's this weird combination of stage play and filmed media. So the most of the audience only ever saw the final cut. They saw the edit. They saw the best take of every scene cut together by the showrunners and broadcast. But a few people, a couple dozen or maybe 100 or so, got to see all of the takes. They got to see all the embarrassing flubs. They got to see all the jokes that just didn't land, that the showrunner then cut out of the script and cut out of the final product, that the larger audience never saw. But that's unusual. Most actors are not doing it for a live audience. Most actors are doing it for a very closed audience, and the final product is whatever the director puts out. And like writing, so for the most part, writing is a very private exercise. You sit down at your computer, nobody's there, you type up some chapters, later you go back and you rewrite them. Maybe you have your editor look at them, maybe you have some friends look at them, but almost all of it is done in private. So the first time the audience gets to see what you've written is when the book lands on bookshelves, and that is the final version of it. And one of the things that comes up a lot when we're talking to wannabe writers is how you get over the fear of letting other people see your work. So using that sort of the context of acting and writing and creative pursuits, the thing I wanted to talk about with you, since you and I have now worked together for 15 years, longer, something like that?
Coming up on 15 years. Yeah.
I'm sure you have written things that you sent to me that later you reread them and go, oh my God, I'm embarrassed I sent that out. I know I've written things that I sent to you and then later reread it and went, oh man, I'm embarrassed I sent that to Daniel. I could have done much better than that. So I'm sure that's going, but that's only one person.
Yeah. And there's a certain amount of, I can, if I embarrass myself in front of Ty, it's not going to be surprised. This is not going to be anything new.
It's that moment of, they've seen my dick before. There's nothing new to laugh at.
Yeah, it's only funny for so long.
Right.
It's there's kind of two fears that I see in new writers, and that I remember from that period of my life before I was entirely encased in callous. There's the fear of people seeing your work, and there's the fear of people not seeing your work.
Yeah.
And I think both of them lead to some kind of artistic deformations.
Yeah, agreed. And that's what part of why I wanted to do this was to talk about the things that hold people back from trying the things that they want to try. Obviously, we've written books together, but we've also written screenplays together and produced television together and all that stuff. So there's, when you get to the sort of the television level, there's hundreds of people involved. And so it's not just you and maybe even you and one other person. It's a whole lot of people, and everybody's reading your work. You know, you deliver a script, a whole bunch of people are going to read that script.
Yeah.
And have thoughts on it. But one of the things one of the conversations I've had with Wes about directors, I don't know if you know this, but Wes is an actor. And one of the conversations.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We won't dig into that one too far, but sure.
Yeah. No. And one of the things we are going to do. So Wes pulled out of doing this episode of the podcast at the last minute through Danielans. So part of our job today with this episode is to just drag Wes as much as possible. Yeah. But as a actor, one of the things Wes and I have talked about is the fear that you have when you don't have what you consider a good director. And what that really made me think about is backstops. You know, it's the net under the high wire, right?
Right.
So the things that make actors comfortable is if they know that the director is strong, that the director has a clear vision, that the director wants to make a good product. They know if they try something and it doesn't work, the director is going to catch it. Directors are going to, you know what? I bet you want that one back. Let's try something else. And so you can walk on the high wire and you're not as scared because, like, you know, if you fuck up, you fall, you're going to land in a net. Everything's okay. And so there's this backstop to it, right? That allows you to experiment, that allows you to try new ideas without as much fear of falling on your face. But there's a lot of creative pursuits that do not have that backstop. You know, with writing novels, you hope that the backstop is your editor and your agent. You hope that that is true. And different agents have different levels of sort of involvement in the creative process.
Yeah.
But definitely the editor should. But of course, now we live in the age where a lot of people are writing first books and just publishing themselves. So they don't have an agent. They don't have an editor. They don't have any of that backstop.
Barely have a publisher. I mean, yeah.
Right. They're just basically mailing it to Amazon and Amazon's putting it on their website. So without that backstop, and this is not a referendum on whether it's better to self-publish or traditionally publish. What I'm interested in is without that backstop, how does a creative who is now for the first time risking putting their creative work in front of an audience overcome that fear of being exposed for the first time? That's an interesting question to me.
Well, so that's an interesting question. And I'm going to, of course, and then immediately deflect. It's also interesting to see how artists and writers try to protect themselves in their work. A friend of mine sent me a book a while back. She wanted me to read, and it was, on a sentence level, perfectly cromulent book, but the narrative voice in it was always trying to get ahead of you and criticize itself before you could criticize the book. So it was being edgy, it was being, meta, and it was, saying, this part of the plot doesn't make sense. What are you going to do about it? And it's like, and I get that. I do. I understand that there's a defensiveness that comes from doing this that's really hard to get back. Doing stuff that has, I think, a lot of reliance on expectations of genre can be that. Where it's like, I'm going to do stuff that's safe. I'm going to do stuff that the people won't hate because all hard-boiled detective books do this. Or there's just so many ways that fear can express, not just in freezing up and not putting the stuff into the world, which is, that's kind of the default failure, but also in deforming the work itself as you're doing it because you're already ahead of it. You're already ahead into the publishing. You're already into imagining the condemnation of the world, and you're trying to do the whole kind of Gen X preemptive irony thing. in the work itself.
Yeah, it's the winking at the audience to let them know you're in on the joke.
And that's something that we talked about when we started doing The Expanse. I mean, we had that conversation about sentimentality and sincerity.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to be sincere. I think it's hard to be vulnerable, and especially when you're doing stuff like, I mean, if you go back and look at Leviathan Wakes, we got better. Leviathan Wakes is not our best book. It did what we needed to do. It did what we wanted it to do. But if we'd been a little bit more worried, it would have been easy to get self-conscious about it. Easy to kind of trip over our own feet with it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're talking about, is that fear of exposure that artistic endeavors brings. Because I'm glad you brought up sincerity and sentimentality. Sincerity is frightening, because the minute that you let somebody know that you genuinely care about something, you have given them a thing to hurt you with.
Yep. And
so, when you're especially with writing, because writing is such a private thing, it is so personal, it's coming entirely out of you. There's no film crew there adding whatever they add. It's just you putting words on a page and sending it out into the world for people to read. And if they hate it, then it's very hard to not think that they hate you, right? It's very hard not to take that personally. And
if you read the reviews online, many of our critics and bloggers and folks are pretty happy to ascribe any failures of the prose to the character of the writer. There's a fair amount of. I mean, I've read some reviews of my work that they were describing something I don't think is me, but they had some opinions about my character and whether I was a good person, whether I was a racist, whether I was a sexist, whether I was creepy. I mean, all of those. When you're putting this out there, you are putting yourself out with the expectation that you'll be judged.
Yeah, and especially with the rise of social media and easy access to wide audiences, there's always been a performative nature to criticism. I mean, Siskel and Ebert was a TV show, and it was intended to entertain. And part of what we tuned into Siskel and Ebert for was not to get reviews of the movies, but to watch the two guys banter and be mean about the movie and be mean about each other. And so there was this performative aspect to it. And that has always been the case with criticism, that there is that part of what the critic is doing is drawing attention to themselves.
Yes. And criticism is itself an art form.
Is itself an art form. And so when you get people who are criticizing projects now with social media and all the other ways, part of what they're doing is trying to draw attention to themselves, trying to get an audience.
And
right.
And just to go fully meta here, there is often an insincerity in that project too, because all of the things that we're talking about with screenwriting or novels is also true of even a book review.
Yep.
When you're putting that out there, you're finding a voice, you're finding an artistic stance that you're taking with that, and you want people to agree with you. You want people to take you seriously. You want people to admire you. You want people to think you're smart. And a lot of times that comes out in, I think Dorothy Parker has a lot to answer for. I love her work, but I think Dorothy Parker has a lot to answer for.
Well, and especially in our current climate, rage sells.
Rage sells, anger sells.
If you go look at the people who have huge YouTube channels, some of them are very genuine, and some of them are just people who angrily rant about whatever the latest thing is, and blame women and blame people of color and blame woke society and blame whatever, but they're just angry about everything. Mm-hmm. And you can get a lot of views. by just being the angry guy.
And it's harder to get those views by being the gentle guy, by being the thoughtful guy who's really interested in the nuances.
I mean, and they're not, now. Don't get me wrong. Those people exist.
They exist,
and
it's a harder sell.
There are some. I don't want to just talk about YouTube. I'm talking about like everything. I'm talking about social media, sort of in general. There are people who have built audiences for themselves by being genuine and not angry.
Yeah,
but the shortcut is to be angry.
That is one shortcut, and it's a very effective one.
And so when you put your work out in the world, you're not only exposing yourself to the people who will genuinely interact with your work, but you're also potentially exposing yourself to people whose brand is rage, whose brand is anger. And so those people are not going to come at your work, whatever it is, books or TV shows or movies or acting, whatever your art form is. They're not going to come at it from a genuinely interested perspective or a genuinely critical perspective. They're coming at it from, how can I be angry about this so I can feed my audience?
Yeah.
And I think part of I didn't think about this until just now, but I think part of the new challenge of becoming a creative, whatever that is, art or writing or acting or whatever, is accepting that you're jumping in the pool with those guys, and they're gonna hate whatever you do just because that's their brand. They hate stuff, and just knowing that doesn't have anything to do with you, that's not about you. It's about them.
There was a time I was talking to Scalzi, and I said, writing is this delicate balance of building a deep understanding and empathy with your fellow humans and the human condition, and then also not giving a shit what anybody thinks.
Yeah.
That's a hard balance. And there have been some people who I think have also gone the other way. I mean, because another reaction to fear, right, is dismissal, denial, taking the criticism of others and saying, I don't give a shit what anybody thinks, I'm doing my own thing, even when what you're doing is kind of iffy.
Right.
I worked with a journalist when I was in college she was the editor of the school newspaper, and she was an amazing editor because she trusted her own critical judgment above anybody else's, and she was unflappable. If we were doing something and it was a debate, she had a vision and she went for it. And when that vision was great, she did some amazingly brave and important things. And when that critical vision was misguided, she drove us right into a brick wall. Just bam! With the same level of certainty in either one.
Let's talk about that, though, because that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, is having a vision that you do not allow other people to sort of adjust your aim ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Is where some of the bravest and most interesting works comes from. Absolutely. But it is also risky, and is part of doing interesting work, being willing to take those risks. Now, there's levels to risk, right? There's the risk of, I wrote this weird experimental book and everybody hated it. That's one kind of risk. It's James Joyce if he was bad. Right? It's like, I wrote this weird thing.
Really? I mean,
yeah, it's like, I wrote this weird thing and it didn't work and everybody hates it. But there's the other version where it's like, I don't like that everybody is all on one side of X issue, whatever that issue is. So I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to be the guy who's angrily on the other side of that issue. And I'm going to write a book about how, forcing women to have kids is a good thing and it's awesome and it makes the world a better place. That's a different kind of risk. I think maybe what I'm reaching for here is is risk assessment, like knowing which kind of risks you're willing to take, right? What kind of criticism are you willing to expose yourself to? Are you willing to expose yourself to you're just a shitty writer? Or are you willing to expose yourselves to you're a great writer, but you're on the wrong side of history on all these important social issues and we think you're a bad person? Because there's that version too.
And there's, I mean, I think any of these versions of fear, any of these expressions of fear are rooted in how you deal with vulnerability, how you deal with making yourself vulnerable. And that is, we're not in a culture that really rewards that. And we're guys, so even less for us. The idea of being emotionally present, of being emotionally vulnerable, of saying or expressing or inhabiting those kinds of places where it's possible to hurt us. If you can get that on the page, if you can get that in the imagery you're painting, whatever you can do, if you can find a place where you can be hurt and you can give that to people, it's something that's kind of the best part of art is having that part of you able to interact and have a conversation with that part of whoever your audience is, who has that vulnerability and that fear and that emptiness and that ability to be hurt in them. And then you kind of have this quiet little moment between the two of you mediated through this thing that's really human. It's really important. It's really kind of the reason to do any of this. I mean, if you want to do this for money, there's better ways to get money. And we're the guys that make the money. We're not the guys that spend the money. You know, we're not putting the money out there. And it becomes incumbent upon us to crack our hearts open and crack our souls open and talk about what it is to be afraid that your wife is going to die, or what it is to be afraid that you're not actually a good person, or what it is to be afraid that you have, so, you know, whatever the subject matter is, whatever the thing is that cracked you open, you have to put that into the work in order to have the work carry the message out.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is this is another thing Wes and I have talked about, where sort of the line between writer and actor is overlaps a bit, and that is the value of fear as an indicator of sincerity, because one of the things he and I have talked about a lot in performance with acting is it is so easy to see insincerity. It's like so visible on the screen when you get an insincere performance. It's impossible to hide it. The camera sees everything.
Yep.
And the human eye is so designed to pick up on insincerity. We've got millions of years of evolution to, you know, that are designed to know that guy's pretending to be my friend, but the minute I turn my back, he's going to hit me with a rock. Right.
Well, and I'm thinking of a particular actor who I will not name because it would be rude, who was not very good until you made them uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, until you knocked them out of their comfortable space.
Knocked them out of their comfort space, made them, you know, and they would resist the most emotional scenes that they had if they got too close to like the lived experience. You had to push through that and put the camera on them and make them feel exposed, and then you got these amazing performances. So, having said that, there is an element of this where if you suddenly become afraid, if you're writing something in it and you feel that fear of, can I put this in the world? Can I let people see this? Mm-hmm. Can that be an indicator that maybe that's your best work? That maybe finally you're cracking through to something real, that you're getting down to something that then your audience is really going to resonate with your audience. Because
the readers that fall in love with you as an author, or the viewers that fall in love with you as an actor, are the ones that see something in your work that touches some secret thing inside of them that they have felt before, or that they've wanted to feel, or that they understand and they didn't think anyone else did. And now you're saying, look, I get you. I feel it too. I understand it too. And that there's a reason why I think this is true for writers and actors who have large audiences. You meet fans and they're already your friend when you meet them.
Right.
They come up to you as if you are old friends. And the way they talk to you is the way you talk to people who are old friends of yours, right?
Yeah.
You don't know them at all, but they're talking to you like we've been friends for years.
But they've already spent hundreds of hours with you.
Yes. Hundreds of hours and deep emotional moments.
Yep.
Where you have explained something to them that they had felt and never put into words before. And there's that moment, we've all had it when you're reading a book and you go, oh my God, this is putting into words a feeling I've had all my life and I've never been able to express. And here it is being expressed. This person gets me at a level that I didn't think it was possible for people to understand me. Yeah. And so maybe, is it possible then that when you feel that moment of that little twinge of fear as you're working, that what is telling you is maybe this is good work. Maybe this is great work.
Yes, but.
Yes, but. Okay.
Yes,
do the yes,
but. But there's also a distance between your emotion behind the keyboard and what actually makes it to the page. There are people who I've been in writers groups with these guys who have said this thing on the page, who have done this thing that is incredibly evocative for them, and I don't know what the fuck they're on about.
Yeah, that's true.
And they've put in a kind of a shorthand for an experience I haven't exactly had. And it's something that they've had, and that's raw for them, and they've written down these words and had a very emotional experience while they were writing it. But the craft then of carrying that on to me as the audience is also critical.
Well, yeah, I mean, bad writers are bad.
Bad writers are bad, and having a strong emotional response doesn't make you a good writer.
Right.
It's a level of art that I think, probably has a lot to recommend it, but it can get lost in the failures of craft, and the craft is also critical to it. And also, you wind up with people and works that carry an emotion and a meaning and a depth that the artist didn't know they were doing. Or didn't intend to.
There's accidental exposures.
There are, and
for sure.
Some of those accidental exposures are fucking brilliant work.
And sometimes they're not something. I mean, I have absolutely seen wardrobe failures in writing, where you're like, oh, you didn't want us to see that.
Yeah,
and we all saw it, and you have just exposed a piece of yourself that. Yeah,
one of my favorite science fiction books is one of the most sweetly vulnerable, open, homoerotic books I think ever written, and that gathered a huge following of people who felt very seen by it. Written by a guy who really hates queers.
Yeah. When you mine those deep emotional things that create some of the best work, there is some shit that's going to get out there that is going to expose you in ways that you won't understand at the time until after the fact.
And and that will horrify you. If you're doing your job right, it's revelatory, and it's a hard place to. And the world isn't safe. The world is not made up of kind actors who are your friends and who are reading your work in order to help you more fully understand your own soul. That's not. I mean, maybe some of them.
And especially in the era of
outrage.
Of outrage and social media, that where the easiest way to build an audience quickly is outrage. I used to, way back in my newspaper days. So we're talking like right out of high school for me.
Way back.
Yeah. For every 12 angry letters you'll get one positive letter.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just because people are 12 times more likely to write an angry letter than they are to write a positive letter. So if you have one positive letter and 12 angry letters, they're probably about even at that point.
Yeah, you're probably doing it about right. That's a good.
You're probably
good
doing
ratio.
it about right. It's hard to remember that when you do work that is exposed to the large and the larger world, and here come the angry reviews, here come the angry attacks. That like, well, this is the outrage culture. This is the people who are building an audience and a brand off of rage and outrage, and it has almost nothing to do with me. This is just what they do. It's hard to remember that. And really then that becomes the tricky thing is the noise ratio, the signal to noise ratio then becomes, which criticisms should I engage with to get better?
Yep.
To actually see what I'm doing wrong or see where I could improve my craft. How do I tease those out of the sort of morass of just
part of
random angry dude?
You never take any evidence off of Goodreads. You just don't.
Yes.
That's not where you go for that. That's not what that is.
And there is the don't read the reviews. Right?
Absolutely.
And some people like to read their own reviews. I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong. You can do whatever you want. But I think there is some wisdom in don't read the review.
I think there's some wisdom in don't read the reviews. I think this is part of why it's so important for artists of any genre of art to have a community.
Yeah.
We have our beta reader. We've always had the same one. We trust her. She tells us what she thinks. We know who she is, so we kind of know what her perspective is. We can interpret what she says, and you get good notes from her. We've had some really good editors, and I think we made some corrections, like within the Expanse, on the basis of some notes that were really good notes.
Yep.
Dongwon, talking about you.
Well, especially and this is a good segue, because the value of taking notes, the value of exposing yourself to criticism from trusted actors, not to the internet at large, because you can't trust anybody out there, but people that you do trust, finding people that you trust to give you sincere notes.
But even then, sincere notes that you can say no to.
Yes, absolutely.
I know that we have both been in the position where we got notes on craft from people who were head and shoulders more successful than we were, and thought, I hear what you're saying, but I think you're wrong on this one, so I'm going to do it my way. Yeah.
And reserving that right, and with the understanding that when it goes wrong, it's on you.
Yeah, no, it's
you got to take the blame when you
say, well, probably should have changed that chapter, shouldn't I?
Yeah, when you face plant. And later you have to go, I was warned that that's what was going to happen. And I elected to ignore that warning. And now here I am face planting.
I can think of issues that we got suggestions for. And I can think of situations where you kind of put a yellow flag on decisions I was making. And I stuck by them, and they are now some of the things that are the most criticized about the work. And I still think I'm right.
So it sounds like then the other piece of this is there is no way to do this without risk. There is no way to be entirely protected.
There's no way.
The fear is appropriate. Because you are doing something that's risky. You are doing something that can cause you pain, cause you harm emotionally, that can lead to failure that you won't be able to blame on anyone but yourself. And that's just part of the gig then. That's just part of it. And you have to understand that and accept it if you're going to do this.
Well, and you have to, and I don't think this is art. I think this is the world.
I've done factory jobs. The only risk there was don't get your fingers crushed by the crushing machine.
Yeah, but no, that's for the job, yes, but for the
talking to the girl in the break room,
talking to the girl in the break room, talking to the guy in the break room, trying to make friends with somebody. talking to your parents about that thing when you were a kid that you never really resolved, to the talking to your spouse about the thing you'd kind of like to change in your life, even though it means changing something in theirs. The decision to engage in some course of study for some job you don't really know for sure you'll ever be good enough to have. There's a lot of risks, and there's a lot of trauma that we're all walking around with all the time. There's a lot of dark shit that lives in the back of all of our heads, and the only way that you metabolize that into something like peace or wisdom or calm is crack that open and be vulnerable and feel things you don't want to feel. And that the skills that you're working with when you're making art from that, and the skills that you're working with when you're just living your fucking life with that, are not that dissimilar.
Well, and past success is no indicator of future success, and is also no indicator of losing that fear. Because I'll just use a simple example. So my wife went through school, absolutely crushed the grading curve, right? Was absolutely at the top of every curve in every class she ever took. Graduated with the highest GPA in the history of the school. And then when she was applying for grad schools, was terrified she wasn't good enough. Then got into the most prestigious school in the world in her field, crushed it there, finished her PhD in less than 4 years, which is crazy fast, right? And absolutely crushed it. And now when we talk about what she wants to do next, is any of that fear gone? No, none of it is gone. So the fact that she annihilated her undergrad, the fact that she annihilated grad school, the fact that she has been at the top of the curve in literally everything she has done in her adult life, when she looks at the next thing, her first thought is, but what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough?
And what we're responding to on those isn't a measurable truth. It's an emotional state.
Right. That's what I was building. So what I was building up to is that I've been working with you for a while. I'm not going to give specific numbers, but at this point in your career, you've sold easily in excess of 12 million books, right? Which is a gigantic number for most writers. Like, most books will sell fewer than 1,000 copies. If you sell 1 million books in your career,
it's a good career.
Amazing. It's a good career, right? You've sold more than 12 million books. You've completed a number of series. You've won all of the awards that you can win for writing.
Enough of them.
And yet, when you're working on a new project, I will eventually get the call or the email where you go, "This is the worst thing I've ever done. It's going to destroy my career. Tell me it's okay. Tell me it's not the worst thing. Tell me this isn't the end of my career."
Yes, and then
you're still having that moment.
And then you will respond, "Oh, no, you're right. You're fucked. It's over." And I'll say, "Thank you. I forgot who I was talking to." Thank you.
That's me. But I'm just I'm just saying that no amount of past success makes the fear go away, because you're still feeling it. You are still feeling that fear.
I'm feeling that fear. I'm feeling the fear that the work I do is bad. I'm feeling the fear that the work I do is exposing me in ways I don't expect to expose myself. I'm feeling the fear that I'm handing evidence that I'm actually a shitty person. All of those things. I've
also heard you say you have this fear that there are times when you feel like you forgot how to write.
Absolutely. On a pretty regular basis. Yes.
Yeah. And at this point, would you say you've written 3-4 million words of prose at this point? Something like that? Because The Expanse alone is like 2 million.
Yeah, no, I mean, The Expanse was that, and then, I mean, the Long Price Quartet was the length of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And then the Dagger and Quang was longer than that.
So you're probably pushing 4 million words of prose?
Probably in there someplace.
And still writing a new book. There's that thing that flashes through your head.
No fucking idea how to do it.
Maybe I don't know how to do this.
And
maybe I've forgotten everything.
And that's not me. We are in a Slack channel with National Book Award winners and New York Times bestselling authors, and a small circle.
He didn't
of
win.
people.
He was just nominated.
He was nominated. We weren't.
No, we were not.
But people who have, by any measure, incredibly successful careers.
Yeah.
And this is a constant refrain.
Yeah.
The constant refrain that we're not good enough, that we used to know how to do it, we don't know how to do it anymore. This is going to be the one that shows and the terrible thing is, some of those books, when you come out, they are going to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, we also know some folks who were at the height of their powers and then tried something new and it face planted.
Yep.
That's also accurate. And the danger with that, the fear in that one, is where our value as people is measured by our success in the marketplace. That's dangerous. That's a really, and the thing about that one is it's never true.
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate, because a lot of really terrible people and terrible work have been enormously financially successful. And a lot of really great people and really great work has died in obscurity.
And well, I've been on my 2 games rant with you, where there's the game where we make beautiful things, and there's the game where we sell them.
Yeah.
And selling them that's gambling. That's the part where we're gamblers.
And we like to believe that there's a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram, but the reality is there's not very much.
And we can say that because we are ridiculously successful. And we can say, look, we are ridiculously successful, and we're really lucky.
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of that came from luck.
Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, one of the best things that you talk about with your career for new writers is you talk about the 3 careers of Daniel Abraham,
right?
And how one of those careers died in obscurity. Mm-hmm. One of those careers is a solid mid-list writer, nothing Daniel to be ashamed of.
Nice, solid,
yeah. And one of those careers is one of the best-selling sci-fi series of all time.
And it's not
and
like
the fact that you're not better or worse as a writer in any of those with any of those careers.
One of them, the cards came out right.
Yeah. So the fear of failure is a legitimate fear, but it's also part of what you have to recognize is you have almost no control over that one. I mean, financial failure. I don't mean artistic failure. I mean financial failure. Whether or not your book, no matter how much heart and soul you put into it, and how much blood, sweat, and tears you pour into it, you don't get to decide whether the audience likes it or not, or whether the audience was ready for it or not, or whether the audience was hungry for that particular thing at that particular moment. I mean, I don't think anyone would argue that 50 Shades of Grey is a great book, but it hit at a moment where there was an audience that was hungry for whatever that book was, and it became enormously successful because of that. So I have friends who have written amazing books. There just wasn't a hunger for it.
Yep.
That particular book at that particular time, nobody was looking for it for whatever reason, and that's reasons that we have no control over.
And that's the part where you just kind of have to be vulnerable to the universe and see what happens. And there are a lot of people who make a lot of money saying that there is a way to be sure.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what they're doing? They're making money by telling people there's a way to be sure. They're not making money off of the thing that they say that they can guarantee.
No, they're not.
All those people I guarantee you can make money doing this thing. They're not making their money doing that thing.
I can tell you how to be a New York Times bestseller, says the person who has not been on the New York Times bestseller list.
Right.
Or
if there was a surefire formula for getting on the New York Times bestseller list, that's all that person would do, because there's plenty of money to be made there.
Yeah. No, that's a much better place than doing writer self-help books, says the guy who's like doing a Patreon where they're exposing the entire process of writing a novel.
So that's a good segue. Let's talk about that. So I don't know, it was a year or two ago, you pitched me a project. Now, and you weren't pitching it to me as something for us to work on together.
It was an idea I've been kicking around. I've been kicking the idea around for years.
Yeah. And there's some history for this. So, I mean, famously, Harlan Ellison would do a thing where he would go to a local bookstore that had a big window, and he would sit in the window at a table with his typewriter, and he would write a short story at that table where anybody could watch. And as each page came off the typewriter, he would tape it up in the window so you could read the story as he went. It's pretty old school. It's pretty analog. But there was a version of demystifying the process. That here's Harlan Ellison, one of the greatest short story writers of that period of time. He's going to sit in a window. He's going to let you watch him type, and he's just going to stick the pages as they come out in the window for you to read. All the mistakes and editorial errors and typos and everything's just there for you to see. You had come to me and said, what if somebody wrote a book and let an audience watch them write the entire time? Sort of the modern version, the digital version of that analog experiment Harlan Ellison was doing, where you let everybody read your first drafts, you let everybody read your notes, you let everybody read your outlines, and they get to watch the book go from nothing to something through the whole process. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really interesting idea. And my pitch to Daniel, who was just talking this idea out, he wasn't trying to sell me on it, but he was just talking it out. And I said, the interesting thing about Jimmy, the James S.A. pen name, is because Jimmy is two people, all of the internal monologue becomes external. That when you're when you're sitting and thinking of an idea you want to write for a story and you're doing it by yourself, you're just thinking. That's boring to put on camera. The camera pointed at somebody as they sit and ponder. But whenever it's a Jimmy project, one of us will have an idea. They'll present it to the other person will go, yeah, that's an interesting idea. And what if we did this? And what if there was this spin on it? And then there's all this back and forth. That is something you can video and record. And thus was launched the project that we're doing, the James S.A. Writes a Novel on Patreon, which is exposing the entire project. One, hopefully to demystify it, that creating something isn't magic. It is work. It's you sit and you talk or you think.
And it's not pretty when you start. It's undignified. And when we started it, we literally went into that project without any clear idea of what we were about to write.
Well, that was actually part of the pitch was let's not write something we've ever talked about. So we have to start from scratch. So we've talked about all the justifiable fears, the justifiable fear of exposing yourself in front of an audience, the justifiable fear of failure in the marketplace, the justifiable fear of exposing a part of yourself that is not going to be taken well by the audience at large and will get you some justifiable criticism. All of those are real fears, and there's nothing wrong with having those fears. But there is another fear, I think, that we can get rid of. And that is the fear that I have to come up with a perfect idea and I have to perfectly express it on the first try and everything has to be perfect.
Yep.
And maybe what this project is hopefully doing, if this is what people are getting from it, is going, look, it's shitty. When you first start out, you're pitching ideas to each other. Some of them are dumb.
Some you forgot.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's okay to think, could I do a story about that? And kind of bounce it around and go, no, that's actually really stupid. I'm not going to do that. That's okay. And, writing first drafts, being okay with a first draft being terrible, right? Mm-hmm. Filled with errors, filled with continuity problems, filled with grammatical mistakes and false starts.
Yeah. And that thing where, the Chinese guy turned into a 6-foot tall redhead between chapters.
The tall Chinese guy turned into a short redhead.
I think something like that. I was like, all right, I don't know. That's really?
So that piece, I think, what's interesting about sort of so I've worked on projects that had a lot of British actors. Mm-hmm. And everybody talks about how the British, the sort of working British actor. I'm not talking about megastars. I'm not talking about Tom Cruise level superstars. I'm talking about just the people who show up in a lot of things, do solid work. When you see them, you go, oh yeah, I remember that guy. He was in that other thing. He was pretty good, right?
Right.
That level of actor from Britain is just so much better. And the reason is the system that actors go through in Britain includes, or has in the past included, and maybe it's changing as the market changes, but in the past has included a ton of stage work. And that is that's That's the Patreon project. That is you going out there and exposing your first draft to a whole room full of people who get to watch you forget your lines and get to watch you, miss your mark and try something that when you were in your dressing room you thought was a great idea, but when you do it, everybody's just like baffled by it. That's exposing all of that. And so by the time you move through that process and get to the point where you're comfortable walking out on a stage in front of hundreds of people and exposing your work to them in real time and not being afraid to be vulnerable in that way, then you put them in a room with a couple hundred people and some cameras. They're not scared at all.
No, they're at home.
They're at home and they're willing to take risks, and they know what the limits of their craft are because they've test drove that in front of live audiences.
Right.
I think my hope for this Patreon project, part of what we're showing is you and I laughing off our mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we're talking and I go, hey, our 6 foot tall Chinese guy turned into a short redhead somehow, and you laugh.
And the answer is, oh, well.
Yeah.
Who knew? Yeah, he got recast. I didn't tell you.
Yeah, that guy died and we had to recast him.
No,
the only person available is this short redhead.
Yeah. It's okay. We're just going to retcon the whole thing. That's going to be fun. And part of what I'm really looking forward to in the Patreon project is the rewrites.
Yeah.
And we're almost a third of the way through the rough draft. Really. I mean, that's that's as far as we've gotten so far. And once we have the whole thing together and we can talk about structurally what works, thematically what works, and take the kind of the first draft clay and start working on it, I think some of the understanding of how you find flaws in things and how you address those and how you take notes and how you remake that's so much of the fun of it. There's so much of the process that I think gets lost for people.
Yes, because on topic, because the fear makes it not fun.
Yes.
Yeah. And being terrified of mistakes sucks all the joy out of the process.
The phase shift of going from I'm creating this thing, I'm making this out of my brain, everything I do, I mean, I have this vision of it, to kind of the Narain version of I'm vaguely dissatisfied with everything about this.
Right.
How can I make it better? I think the confidence that you need to go into that second phase is interesting. I think there is a fear that can keep you from taking that step and keep you from rewriting or stick you forever in rewriting. I mean, it goes both ways.
So we can't keep Joseph here all day, so we should start wrapping this up. I'm sure we could
keep Joseph here on all day long
for hours and hours. But since Joseph obviously didn't know the topic of the conversation today, and so could not create a top 5 list, don't force us to look at you. Get the fuck out of here, Joseph. Since he could not be blamed for not coming up with the top 5 because he had no idea.
Right.
I had a top 5. And we can go back and forth on this. I want to do the top 5 ways that fear can fuck you up when you're doing a creative endeavor. And my number one, the top of the list, because I have watched fear destroy friends of mine's careers. I've watched it happen. So I want to talk about some of that. But I think the number one, and I think every writer will understand this as number one, is the fear of the blank page. Just starting is terrifying, because what if my first line is bad? What if my idea is bad? What if I get a couple pages into this and I don't know where to go?
Well, and freedom is complete freedom. The beauty of the blank page is you have total freedom, and it's the worst obstacle there is.
Yep.
Because every decision you make carves away so many things that might have been better.
Yeah, and so it is every writer faces this. Screenwriters, novel writers, short story writers, magazine writers, newspaper writers, it doesn't matter. That first line is terrifying. I have a solve that I've come up with for myself. May work for other people, may not. But when I don't know what line to start a chapter with, or book with, or story with, I jump to the first conversation because dialogue is easy for me.
Yeah, I can.
So I just jump down to I put in quotes and I start writing the first line that somebody says. So and so said, and then I get a couple of as much of as a page into it. Then I go back and I set the scene. Because I've already broken the white wall. The white wall is broken now. There's text on the page. So I jump back up to that and I go, they were sitting in the room. There was this kind of furniture, whatever. But setting the scene for the conversation I've already written. That's kind of my way to sneak past that fear of the white page. Doesn't work in every circumstance. Doesn't always work. But it is one way that I've found to get past it. So that's number one, fear of the white page. Number two, go.
Fear of showing your incompetence publicly. That's not just art. I'm afraid of that when I'm writing. I'm afraid of that when I'm screenwriting. I'm petrified of that when I'm producing because I haven't done enough producing to really get good at it yet, or to feel like I'm good at it yet. I understand producing in a way that I absolutely did not when I started doing on-set producing. Totally didn't get it as well as I do now. And it's that floundering feeling, that sense of being out of your depth and not good, and like everybody's gonna pity and laugh at you. And it is the fear that keeps you in the shallows, and it's the fear that keeps you from getting better, and it's the fear that keeps you from doing interesting work. It's the thing that makes you just stay. They talk about the comfort zone. That is the fear that polices your comfort zone and keeps you from doing stuff.
Yeah.
And it happens constantly.
Do you have
consistently. A solve? No. I just suffer it. I mean, the solve is
do it anyway.
The solve is suffer it, and if you can develop a sense of humor about the feeling itself, about going in and saying, yeah, I mean, I love my daughter. When she was a kid, her superpower was she could go into like a new class or a new situation and stand up and say, hi, I'm really socially anxious and I'm terrified of all you people. Nice to meet you. And it was a power move for her.
Yeah. Yep.
Because she was saying out loud what everybody was feeling. So for me, I've tried to emulate her. When I'm feeling incompetent, I can say, I feel really incompetent about this. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't.
I occasionally have to tug your leash on that one because there are times when we need to come across as competent, whether we feel competent or not. And I'll be like, Daniel, stop being self-deprecating. Stop telling everybody how incompetent you are.
In the middle of a sales pitch, it's a terrible time for that. Yeah. Well, I'm not saying it's a perfect solve. I'm just saying it's the one I got.
So that's fear of incompetence. I would call that the fear of failure.
I don't think so. I think it's different. I think it's different, but go ahead.
No, failing to be good at the thing you are trying to be good at.
Sure.
Right? The reason I called it fear of failure is because the third one, I think, for me, and I watched at least two people's careers absolutely destroyed by this one, and that is fear of success.
Absolutely.
What do you do when the first thing you try actually isn't obscure, isn't a failure, doesn't disappear without a trace, actually lands, and people notice it, and it gets talked about, and it gets reviewed, it gets good reviews, and it sells a few books, and now you got to do the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So a good friend of mine, he died not too long ago, but we would, when I lived in New Mexico, we would hang out all the time. He was a writer. He had written a book in the 80s that was fairly successful, got good critical reviews, sold fairly well. He had some buzz. People were talking about this guy as he was going to be the next big thing in sci-fi. He had a contract to write. The publisher was so happy with the first one, they immediately bought a second one from him. But he had a contract to write the second book based on the success of the first. And he froze up. It took him 10 years before he wrote that second book. And by the time it came out, everybody had forgotten the first one. And so the second one disappeared without a trace. And he sort of struggled in general obscurity from then on. Because in the moment, when the spotlight hit him on the stage, he locked up. And you and I have a friend who had another friend who first book came out in a series, in a what was sold as a series. Got a lot of success, got a lot of critical notice, got some award notice. And the fear of not living up to the expectation of that first book meant he never wrote the rest of that series.
Yep.
He never wrote the second book.
Yep.
And that fear of somebody noticed me, now people are paying attention. What if I'm not as good as I'm supposed to be? What if the next thing I do exposes me as a fraud?
And you're given one version of this, because you're given the one where somebody hits it big and then freezes.
Mm-hmm.
We also know people who are afraid of even getting the spotlight on them.
Right.
Who feel so comfortable in failure that they undermine and destroy their careers. They make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision in order to stay in someplace.
Well,
safe.
fear of losing the identity.
Fear of losing the identity. I mean, we have a friend who is not any of the people we've been talking about. Walter John Williams has a thing where he says, I choose not to believe in free will as a courtesy to my friends. Yeah. And he's talking about that feeling. He's talking about that thing where you watch people who cannot reach out for the brass ring for fear that they might get it.
Right. And so much of their identity is I'm the guy who got fucked over by publishing. When you're no longer the guy who got fucked over by publishing, what are you?
Yes. And how weird is that?
Right.
So how do you fix that one?
So the one solve for that, and this is not mine. This comes from somebody else who is very smart. This is the person who has been our beta reader for many, many years. She read Leviathan Wakes, gave us notes on it. And one of the things she said in the email that she sent back is she's like, I think this is going to be a hit. I think it's going to do really well. And I think you guys should finish the second book before it comes out.
Yep.
And the point of what she was saying was, if you're already done with the second book before the success or failure of the first book becomes public, then all of the pressure is off. The second book already exists. You don't need to worry about it. You've already sent it to the publisher. It's already in the editorial process, right? And so by staying ahead of the wave, by staying in front of the wave rather than on top of it, you sort of take some of that fear away.
Because it's already so distant from your ego. It's already distant from yourself. It's already in the past. It's that thing you did a while back. Oh yeah, I remember I did that.
So I think the answer is, before the first thing you made is out in the world, write the second thing.
Next.
And it doesn't have to be a series. It could be anything. It'd be like, I wrote a book. It's a standalone. I've sent it out to my agent, or I've sent it off. It's being edited, or whatever the process is. Before it ever comes out, before people start engaging with it, you've already begun or finished the second thing you were going to do. You already have that in the pipeline. And so now it is not the reaction to the first thing dictates the rest of my career. It's, I'm just going to be writing a bunch of books. Some of them will work, some of them won't. That's sort of irrelevant to the thing I'm working on now. So I'm already working on the third thing. And just not letting the success or failure of the previous thing dictate what you do next.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now it's my turn again, right?
Number 4.
I don't think we've claimed fear of unintentional exposure yet.
Yeah.
The fear that you will, by writing what speaks to your heart, let everybody know that dirty, awful little secret thing that's been bothering you your whole life, and that you're worried about, that is this the shame that your day-to-day life is built to hide. You've put it on a billboard. And whether that's you've written, you who are desperately afraid of your homosexuality have written sweetly homoerotic books, you who don't talk about your father in anything but glowing terms, are going to expose that every book you have is wrapped around daddy issues. You who think of yourself as a nice, upstanding, nice guy are going to get a raft of, oh, you think that of women. I'm
really worried that my wife is going to read this book and discover that I'm really curious about polyamory.
Yeah. Or
and take it wrong. Yeah.
Or whatever it was Heinlein was doing in his heart.
Or whatever Heinlein was doing.
I don't know. Whew.
He was exploring a lot of issues.
He was
in print.
exploring a lot of stuff, and some of it very consistently.
You have a solve for this one?
Yeah. Therapy, be a grown-up about it. Own your shit.
Get over your shit. Get over your shit.
Own your shit. I think that if you are writing books about homosexuality and sweetly homoerotic books, maybe just you could live a better life by exploring that a little bit and just coming to peace with it, incorporating some of that into your life. I'm not one of those guys who believes, and this is a David Lynch kind of famously refused to go into therapy because he was afraid that if he got his shit together, he'd stop being creative.
Right.
I'm not that guy. I don't believe that pain leads to good art.
That's like the guys who think they can't do good work unless they're high or drunk.
Yeah. I think if there is an issue that is central to your life, engaging with it and understanding who and what you are better actually leads to better work. I think that the one guy we were talking about, whose name we have not mentioned, would be turning out better work now if he had owned his shit. That's like saying, well, if you want to get past this, be a Jedi Master. Yeah, I know, but I don't know. I don't know a better way. I don't know a better way to go. Okay.
Yeah. So the number 5 is the one that is going to have the least satisfying answer. And it is that fear. You talked about fear of incompetence. Incompetence is one thing. Incompetence is maybe you could be good at the thing, but you just have to spend more time doing it. You have to learn what you need to learn. You are an egg. You don't know yet. You don't know yet. For me, there is the fear. Maybe I just suck. Maybe I'll never be good. Maybe I just don't have this, call it talent, whatever it is, whatever you call it. And the least satisfying answer is maybe not. Maybe do something else. We and I'm not trying to tell anybody how to live their life, for sure. But we know people who have been banging their head against writing for 50 years without making a crack, without making a dent. And you read stuff that they put out recently, and it's not any better than the stuff that they were writing 40 years ago. It's still bad.
Well, and we know people who have taken all of the internships and all of the workshops and all of the how to write and how to master your craft, and you give them a really fraught, deep, emotional script to write, and they're baffled.
Yeah.
No, let me rephrase this maybe in a slightly gentler way. One of the things that I think you can get trapped in is thinking that there's only one art for you, that you are only one thing.
Yeah, that was where I was going to.
Yeah, the struggle to find your art, to find your medium, to find the place that you get along with best.
I guess the secret to getting over this fear is it's okay to discover that that's not the thing for you. It's okay to try things. And we're, Daniel and I are writers, so it may seem like we're talking specifically about writing, but I'm not talking about any artistic endeavor. And
you just said the thing that's the most important, which is it's okay to try something else.
Yep.
It's okay. So I one of the other things I've learned raising my kid, there's the whole winners never quit. That's bullshit.
That's bullshit.
Winners quit all the time. They know what to quit. They quit early. They quit often.
Yep.
And then they want to use their time on something else.
Right. Because you can't do everything.
Because you can do anything. You can't do everything.
Yeah. So you got to find, you got to, I mean, it's okay if you try something and you sort of bounce off of it. That's okay.
Yep.
I mean, I think most things you benefit from going to the point where you develop sort of minimum level competence. Like I have minimum level competence in a wide variety of things. I can kind of do a ton of things. I'm minimally competent at music. I'm minimally competent at drawing and art. I'm minimally competent at a ton of things. But I also recognize when I hit that minimum level competence, I'm like, oh, here's what the next level looks like. And
I don't have that in me.
I don't have that.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't have that. I'm not the guy who's going to turn into that.
Yes.
And it's okay to see that and go, oh, yeah, that's not me.
I'm going to go fuck off into something else.
And it's not a personal failure. It's not the end of you as a person. And
quitting isn't losing.
Yeah, you only have so much time, and it just means you're good at resource management. It's like I could put a ton of time into this thing that I'm never going to be good at. And I think part of it is have you decided your identity before you develop your skill set? Because we both know a ton of people. Now, we come from the writing world, but this is true for a lot of things. It's true for acting. It's true for a lot of music. I hung out with a lot of musicians when I was younger because I was playing music a lot. People decide their identity before they develop the skill. So they're like, I'm going to be a musician. And they decide that ahead of time, and then they try music. And then when they reach the point where they're never going to be the next level musician, it's devastating because they had created that identity ahead of time. We know writers like that, people who decided they're going to be a writer and tell everybody, I'm going to be a writer. And that becomes their identity. And then they reach the point where they just don't have the chops. And you're not going to make it to the next level. So, and now you lose your whole identity.
And so I think almost all of the fears that we've been talking about the whole way through this whole conversation, if you needed to distill the solutions we have or the ways to get around them, I think they almost all fit under the umbrella of being gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
And it's an easy thing to say, and damn, it's a tall order.
Yep. Well, there you go. That's there's the answer there. Be gentle with yourself.
Poor bastard.
Give yourself permission to not be good at things that you're not good at.
Easy to say, and it's a lifetime figuring out how to do it.
All right. I think that'll do it. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, if you're curious about that thing we were talking about, come hang out with us on Patreon. It's fun.
Yeah, we're about a third of the way through the book that we're doing, at least the first draft of it. So if you're curious about that, you can check that out. Not that we're trying to drive people to go over there. If you're curious about it, do. If you're not curious about it, don't. This is something Daniel and I are doing for the fun of it. We're not paying our rent off of it. So
no, it is not a significant income stream for us.
Yeah,
and in fact, probably there are many people who would rather we went and did the thing we get paid more for.
Say goodbye, Ty.
Fuck off, Joseph.
And if Wes comes back next week, you will see a much larger and more charismatic man in this space. Good luck.